I'm not completely doubting by I don't think so.
This is a poem called Only This. There is no possibility for words to convey, and yet they try. This moment when and where no one remains, but by and by, listening can bring what lies behind the words to be tasted, and in that instant it is seen that not a single one was wasted. It is not in the spoken words themselves that this is known, yet by being present and attentive to them, gradually it has grown, until finally what has previously been overlooked as naught is seen in all its obviousness to be something never bought, for all along it always was and is one's right of birth. Absent of all qualities, it has not received or seen its worth. By a mind based solely on the worthiness of things, it remained unrecognised, unnoticed, waiting in the wings, until the time the star roll called for its manifest appearance, and the attention, void of objects, gave its clearance to this that was the watcher all along in every instance, the void within which appears the illusion of time and distance. Simple in itself and yet profound beyond description, this that brings out of itself the all that is creation, knows now the deepest value is this vast empty nothingness, and so in each and every moment it is seen there is only this. Now, it's the nature of the mind to live in a becoming process. It's always, for its very existence, projecting into a possible future moment or a previous moment. And the mind is simply present, has attention. What we find is that actually this concept of time clearly is just a concept. And in truth, this is all there is. This moment is all there is. And this moment is, it's got nothing to do with time. This moment is eternal. But when the mind flickers, it moves to a possible past, a possible future, it creates a sense of time. And in this we begin to think of ourselves as time-bound, an object of time. This is actually not what we are. It's not true of us at all. What we are is timeless. What views the appearance, the illusion, the play of time has to be timeless. You know, something as simple as looking at your watch. In that moment, you're not referring whatever, chronographical time is present there. You're not referring that to another moment of time. You're referring it to the timeless. When you look at your watch and it says 10:10, what is registering that something is 10:10 in time is the timeless. What is looking at that watch in that moment is timeless. You're the timeless. You don't have an age. Your body ages. mind, in the sense, ages too. It comes and goes. It has a thought is born, a thought exists for a very, very short time and then disappears. So your body-mind is time-bound, but you're not. You see the body getting older. What the age of the body is referring to is something that isn't in that becoming process. It doesn't age. It's just always just what it is. It's just present, just is. And this, for most of us, is the fact that we overlook. If we're overlooking it, what we do quite naturally is we put the attention on the body, or we put the attention on the inner body, the mind. And because these things are time-bound, as we put our attention on them, we identify with ourselves as a time-bound being. And we fall into that illusion of having been born, of being something that is going to die. If we get a bit spiritual, we fall into that idea of being something that reincarnates and has another lifetime and has had a previous one. And in a sense that's true, you know. Every human lifetime took place in the timeless. Everything that took place in the timeless was an action of the timeless. And because you are the timeless, that means that every human experience was actually an experience happening within you. But because you're the eternal, those things aren't necessarily remembered. And can you imagine if you had all the memories of every human being present right now and you're trying to make a cup of tea, you know? There'd be an overload somewhere, it'd be a total interference, you'd never get the tea made. So when we're present, we're just simply here, what becomes very obvious is that this is all there is. There's nothing outside of this. Whatever's happening, wherever it's happening now. And what it's happening in is the timeless, is what we are. If happening came to an end, if the arising and manifestation ended, what is viewing the arising and manifestation in this moment through these forms would still be present. To be present to itself. And because it can't make an object out of itself, it wouldn't even know that it was present to itself. In the same way as it's not possible to remember deep sleep. In deep sleep, there is no other. There is no object. And so therefore, the subject of the object in the waking state is not even subject to itself. The subject becomes a non-subject in deep sleep. In death, the same. And sometimes this can be a bit of a scary place for people when they suddenly become present and realise that, oh my God, are you telling me there's no continuation? Well, continuation in time there isn't. Continuation as the eternal moment, obviously, is forever. It's eternal. There's a big difference between infinite and eternal. And many people use these two words thinking that they're talking about the same thing. The eternal has got nothing to do with time. The infinite is that which continues in time. What we are doesn't continue because it's timeless. It's permanent. Something that is permanent does not continue, it just is. It doesn't go anywhere in time, it doesn't advance, it doesn't retard, it isn't doing anything actually, it just is. What is looking through the eyes of these forms, what is experiencing itself through the senses of these forms, is this that just is. It's very easy to overlook this fact. When this itself and the eternal itself overlooks itself and attaches itself to the body-mind, suffering takes place. When it again gives attention to itself, notes that there is something observing the body-mind, then the suffering starts slipping away. The body feels very different then, and acts very different also. The mind too is no longer a problem. There's an easiness about life when we know what we are, when we no longer overlook what lies behind the body-mind, observing the play of the body-mind. And that's all this big event called enlightenment is. It's not about achieving anything at all. It's simply about seeing what is always present but often overlooked. And of course, when it's overlooked, what is overlooking is it anyway. So even when you're overlooking, which we could call unenlightenment, if it means anything at all, even when we're overlooking, it is just this that is overlooking itself. It's still present, it's just overlooking itself. In meetings like this gives itself attention. Look at the hand. The hand is being looked at by something that is not a colour or a shape. It has no form. It doesn't matter which hand is looked at. It doesn't matter which pair of eyes this one is looking through. The view at this end is always the same. Formlessness. Observing form. And when we stabilise in this recognition, what we recognise is that all the form around us, whatever it is, candlelight, the flower, the chair, is arising in the formless. The formless is the source of what is appearing, and what is appearing is arising in the formless. And in this, of course, is this recognition that everything is actually one. It appears dualistically, but it isn't dualistic, it's one. When you see that you're nothing, when you see that emptiness is true of you, everything that appears in that emptiness is appearing in you. Nothing is actually over there or over here. There isn't a time in space or a place in space that you occupy. It's just this, and this is all there is. This is arising in this moment. What prevents the seeing of this is when this, which in itself is nothing, overlooks itself, sees itself as the body or the mind. It creates this image of itself as either the body or something within the body. And it refers to itself when it uses the word me or I as the body or something within the body. Overlooking the fact that what the word me or I is actually referring to is the emptiness that is viewing the body-mind. The moment that has been called self-realization or enlightenment is that moment where again the ceasing to overlook of what is looking at the body-mind takes place. The sense of me as the body or me as the mind then immediately is eradicated. And the word, which is just an action arising within the emptiness itself, points to the emptiness. In each one of these bodies we know that word me. Doesn't matter what language it is expressed as. We all use that word many, many times a day. We all think that word many, many times a day. And often mistakenly thinking that word is referring to either the body or something within the body, which is the mind. When we see that neither of those things, which are both temporary, are actually what that word is referring to, then this thing called enlightenment is already taken place. Nothing special, just the ceasing to overlook of what was already the case all along. Nothing new, but a huge relief. The body then is just allowed to be a body. The mind then is allowed to be the mind. It isn't controlled, it isn't forced, it isn't disciplined. It's just allowed to flow, rise naturally within this emptiness. This is why in true spiritual life, you see, there are no methods or techniques. These things would be disciplines. There's no discipline. There's just the seeing of what one is. There's nothing to get to. There's just the seeing that what one is already present. What all the great ones spoke about isn't elsewhere, but right where you are. The you that is observing the appearance of the body and the mind. There's not even a path. There's nothing to get to. This is always this. It's never not this. Even when the thought arises within this, that it is other than this, this is still present. This is all there is. There's nothing outside of this. And within this, the illusion of time appears, the illusion of space, distance appears. And that's fine. Adds to the fun of the experience. And nothing is actually happening really. Energy is appearing as people, energy is appearing as a room, as cars, as sounds, ultimately going nowhere. Just energy warping and wafting, manifesting as the world. It's no direction. It's just a movie playing in the moment. It's not unfolding to a future moment. It's just this moment. And everything within this moment that is part of the activity, the manifestation, is pointing back to this within which it's arising. So in that sense, everything is serving this purpose. Every object in this room has a sacred purpose in a sense. It points back to the one that is experiencing it through whichever sense it's being experienced through. If a run my hand along the settee, I feel the texture of the material, and the feeling refers back to something that is absent of any feeling. So the object is performing in that moment a sacred task. It's pointing back to its source. The object is manifesting from that source, within that source. And when that is recognized, there's no sense of being somebody within the body. There's no sense of being the body itself. There's just this. So enlightenment is simply the recognition or the inclusion again of this which is in most cases being overlooked. Simply that, as simple as that. There's no need for purification or chanting mantras or any of those things. Very ordinary, very normal, and so familiar when we rest in it. And this, in a sense, is why it's so easy to miss it, to overlook it. We overlook what we are, we overlook ourselves, because it's so familiar to us that the mind doesn't think it's even worth checking out, even worth noticing. When we lose sight of what we are, we immediately begin to seek. We fall from this oneness into the sense of separation, into the illusion of duality, and the seeking begins immediately. And the seeking obviously can get very elaborate. As the seeking energy unfolds, it creates all sorts of avenues to go down and check out where the answer lies. Of all these traditional spiritual things around us and religions telling us, oh, if you do this, if you do that, if you go there, if you have this experience. It's not about any of that. There's no requirement for one more experience before we recognize what we are again. It's not dependent on experience, because in itself it's a non-experience. It's an ever-present non-experience, just rested in the background observing the play. Somebody was talking about the Dalai Lama yesterday, who I quite like actually, but she was saying that apparently he's been born 7 times. And I said, well, yeah, when you're seeking, and if he believes that, he's still seeking. When you're seeking, so many avenues to go down. Well, maybe it's down this one. What's this one called? Buddhist Street. Okay, we'll try that one, you know. The next street is Christianity Street, or, you know, Hindu Street. As you walk down these streets, you get all this snippets of information, all this knowledge that you're given, this spiritual knowledge. This is the game of seeking, not the game of finding, not the game of ending the seeking. And it can be very addictive as well. People love seeking, there's no doubt about this. Yeah, well, I've been seeking for 40 years, so I'm actually an advanced seeker. You're just a beginner. I know a lot more than you. I'm closer to it now, you know. And then many years ago, meeting a a priest from San Francisco who was a Zen priest, you know, and he was the Zen priest of the San Francisco Zen monastery. And this guy was so lost it was beyond words. And I had a very good friend present in the retreat who was a very simple man, very beautiful man, who'd awakened at a very early age whilst delivering a calf early in the morning. As he pulled this calf out of this cow, he looked into the calf's eye and he realised that there was nothing in there, and his attention fell into that nothingness and he awakened. And obviously some years later when he was with me, he was stabilised in this realisation. And this Zen priest was constantly trying to impress everybody, you know. Could you notice I've got different clothes to you people? I'm somebody who's busy, you know, being nobody, and it was a very interesting situation. And he stood up one morning, it was just after he'd had breakfast, and he said, I got up this morning as usual at 5:30 and looked around at all the scum who didn't get up till 8 o'clock, 8:30, you know. And what he didn't know was both myself and my friend were actually up even before he was. And we were both sat on either side of a football pitch in the forest, watching the deer going back into the forest, you know, after the night of grazing on the football pitch. And we watched this idiot, you know, just wandering around full of mind stuff, you know. And he stood there and he said, I was stood underneath a tree and I heard two pigeons calling, two doves calling. And as I listened, I heard a voice saying to me, and before he could say anything else, this guy who was a shepherd at the back said, be quiet, you fool, be quiet, you fool, be quiet, you fool. And he said it in the way that a pigeon would say, you know. And it was so funny that everybody just cracked up laughing, you know. And this guy, who to that point had been so poised and correct and, you know, just really freaked out. He got so angry and stamping his feet and, you don't recognise who I am, any of you, you've got no respect. Really lost it, you know. And everybody sat there like, wow, it was an incredible performance, you know. Now, in that retreat, we were broken up into groups of 8 people, and it just so happened that my friend and I and him were in the same group. And that afternoon, I can tell you, that man was very different in that group. And when he was leaving that evening, he said, you know, I've got so lost in a bloody spiritual ego, I can't believe it. Initially, obviously, there'd been, you know, a sincere desire to find the answer. You know, he knew he was seeking. He got wrapped up in all that paraphernalia and that rubbish of Zen Buddhism. Always walking around with this straight back and sitting correctly, and this has got nothing to do with that, you know. This has got nothing to do with how you sit or what position your back is in, or always looks bloody painful when I look at these people with crossed legs and straight backs and, you know, staring at a white wall, you know. So much beauty in this world. What the hell do you want to look at a white wall all day for?
Can I say something?
No. Looks like you're saying it though.
About what's seen through the eyes. I read a book called Nobody Home by Jan Kirstoff, something I think he's called. Another one of Tony's sort of, you know, friends. And he talked about the third eye. And what he was saying was that actually the real third eye is actually what's seen. You don't see through 2 eyes. I would like to ask you about it. You know, you see what you see. It's the third eye actually. What he was seeing. you see one. You get one field of vision. You know, you don't see two.
Mm.
And he was saying actually that is actually the third eye. This third eye that we hear about, this, you know, this esoteric experiences people refer to, is not, basically it's as simple as that, you know, that is the third eye. I don't know what you would say about it.
Mm.
That was his view of it, or comments on it.
Well, you know, we have a tendency to live conceptually, don't we? You know, we live conceptually. We don't differentiate clearly between ideas and facts. In this moment, conceptually, I am looking through two eyes.
Yeah.
In this moment, perceptually,
Exactly.
in this moment, perceptually, there's not even an eye here looking.
Yeah.
There's a field of vision that has no edges and no boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Within that, there can be a concept that there are two eyes looking here. And from where you're looking at this face, you know, that is not a concept. That is a fact. That's what you see, you know. But from where you are looking at this face, it is not a fact that there are two eyes there. That is a concept. Now, what sees through the eyes doesn't just use the senses, you know, of the eyes themselves to see. Otherwise, when the eyes are closed, as in, you know, sleep, in the dream state, we wouldn't see things, would we? We're not looking at the dream state through our eyes, yet we see colours and shapes, and we see another world in there. So something else is doing the seeing, and this is what has been termed the third eye. It's not a concept. It's what is seeing. Yeah, that which is doing the seeing. Yeah, and that which is doing the seeing. You see, when you bypass the concept of two eyes, and you're present to, you know, the percept of the moment. I, in this moment, do not perceive two eyes looking at this room. The eye, which is the emptiness, is looking at its own manifestation appearing as a room in this moment. And within that, there are no boundaries, no edges. So that which sees is the third eye. The seeing itself is the third eye. And of course, because there is like a gland in the body here, at this point in the body, when people have heard this information and not been able to differentiate between a concept and a percept, because like I say, we get very mixed up in this area. You know, we're brought up through our conditioning, through education, to conceptualize our reality and not perceive it properly. We get very mixed up, and so we start looking for a physical object that is a third eye. And of course we arrive at what they call the sahasra, which is this gland here. But we don't see from here. But this is what's been termed, oh, you have a third eye, and they say, oh, it's here, you know. Actually, it's not. It's closer to here than it is to here. It's, you know, it's much higher up. It's just below here. And of course, this is a gland like any other gland. It can get activated as the levels of consciousness become, you know, more attended to. You know, you can be in a high or low level of consciousness, and that can shift in any moment. It's never permanent. If you're in a high level of consciousness, you know, as you're moving into that level, various glands which are somewhat dormant in the body, especially, you know, from this level upwards, start activating, and you feel them. When this one activates, it's like there's like a and it opens. It's literally like something fluttering, you know, and all the petals start fluttering, and it suddenly goes, and then there's no movement. There's just stillness there. But that stillness at that point is still an object. It's a subtle object, that stillness. What's noticing the presence of that stillness is real stillness. But then that was noticing what was happening at the first chakra and the third chakra and all that stuff, you know. And what, like typically, for instance, yoga has done, is find places within the body, where it relates to objects, physical objects in the body, and claims these to be, you know, the chakras and things. And the third eye is one of those. But the third eye has got nothing to do with this. This does open. The third eye is the seeing. The seeing itself is the third eye.
Yeah, that's what he was seeing, the same.
Yeah,
Really.
yeah. And of course, when you rest as the seeing, not as the seer looking at the scene, but the seeing itself, you realise that the seeing is this. There isn't a seer and an object seen. There's just seeing. There's no me looking at this. There's just seeing. There's just happening. There's just action. That's all there is here. There's just action happening.
So nobody.
It becomes very, very clear at a certain point. This is what I'm saying about, you know, like what I term like spiritual romanticism. Somebody tries to explain this and they say, you know, they use the term third eye, and immediately, you know, the romantic side of the spiritual seeker goes looking for this object, you know. Yes, there is a gland here that does, or can, doesn't have to. It does open up on occasion. It doesn't open up for everybody. Enlightenment is not dependent in any way on these glands activating, because it's got nothing to do with levels of consciousness. You know, awakening can happen when the energy is at, you know, what they call the first chakra. It can happen at the fifth chakra or the seventh chakra. You know, it makes no difference, because we're not working on experiences or levels of consciousness. What is viewing every one of those levels is this that, you know, has been referred to as the third eye. The seeing is what is seeing every one of those levels. Every single experience, high or low, is seen by the same thing. And this is why the progressive spiritual, so-called spiritual path, doesn't actually work. If it arrives at all at this, it's not because of the progression. It's because the progression suddenly stops, comes into doubt, and in the stopping there's a recognising, wait a minute, there's something here present that's been present all along, wasn't actually going anywhere, but was watching this subtle play within the mind, this idea of getting somewhere. And then it's seen. It's never the result of progression. I keep saying this, you know, there isn't one of these bodies that is not living this. Living from it, it's living through us, you know. There's only this. There's only that. There isn't anything else. You know, when we try to get to this or try and experience this, we're assuming there's something other than what we already have. And there isn't. This is all there is. Maybe the mind doesn't like that idea, you know, but we're not here to please the mind. There's lots of things the mind doesn't like about this thing called enlightenment. Eventually what you're left with is no choice but to perceive the world. You're in perception. Even when a concept arises, you're very aware that you're perceiving the concept. You know, we walk around with the idea that we're looking at the world with two eyes, you know. It's a concept.
Yeah,
and Daisy doesn't have that.
It's really quite easy to see, isn't it, as well? It's not difficult.
Yeah.
It's not difficult to see that.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to look and see, you know, that what you see is one field of vision.
In a sense, you have to be open to being childlike.
Yeah.
You know, if you try and point out to Daisy now that she's got two eyes looking at the world, even if she had the intelligence to understand your words, she wouldn't have the ability to conceptualize it. As far as she's concerned, you're very mixed up if you try and tell her that, you know, because that is not her perceptual experience. And for sure she is having a perceptual experience, because when you smile at her, she smiles at you. She's not having a conceptual experience. That comes, you know, if, you know, mum and dad mess up and start sticking all that conditional conceptual stuff there, you know. And you see it with kids, don't you? You know, what's one of the first things we do? The kid gets to a certain age and go, you know, you're there sticking your finger and going, nose, and the kid's going, nose? I can't see any nose. Eyes, and the kid's going, I've got a feeling there, there's a feeling here. Maybe that's an eye. You know, what's this? This is a feeling, or maybe this is a nose. And of course, if you don't get the message, you know, you get this frown, you know, 2 eyes, you know, a nose, a mouth, you know. When eventually the kid says, oh, for fuck's sake, okay, 2 eyes and a nose and a mouth, and, you know, I'll buy into the deal, just get rid of that bloody frown on your face, you know, let's communicate again, you know, in that loving space. And this is how literally we train our children. We take them from the perceptual reality into the conceptual reality, along with all the other concepts that we build on it then. We literally train them. You're not that, you're not that, you're not that, you're this, you're that, you're this. We place a mask on the child where the mask has no concept. You know, conceptually that child isn't able to build a mask there. It doesn't perceive a mask there. And then what do we do? Round about the age of 4 or 5, you know, somebody says, oh, he's ever so shy. Oh, my son's ever so shy. Like that's an innocent, beautiful, sweet thing. No, it's a problem. You've put a mask there, and you're now face to face with the world. You're face to face with other people. You've got this imaginary thing here that blocks you out from the world. You've created a separation, you know. Now you're in duality. You know, and people somehow think that it's a nice thing, you know. Don't look at, you know, older people in their face when you talk to them and things like this, you know. This is a horrible thing we've done to ourselves. You see it with Daisy, she loves people's face there. There's no idea of me here facing a face there. You know, she isn't facing the world, is she? That's a concept. And the funny thing is, when we hold that concept face to face with the world, we can't do it. It's like, many times, you know, in Satsang particularly, when somebody comes maybe for the first time, it's very difficult for them when they ask a question, which is very brave of them usually, if it's their first time. When you go to give them the answer, naturally you look at them, and often they're like, because they've got this concept of being face to face with the one who's speaking to them, and they can't do it. Within that is all these barriers, you know, because the moment you put a mask on, you're inferior, you see. You know, you're the vastness itself when there's no mask. Anybody who hasn't got a mask does not look like that. They look straight at you. The innocence of this, you know, is able to look, you know, into the face of a king or a queen. You know, it's all the same. This takes away so much, this recognition. Takes away all that conditioning rubbish, all that ideas that somebody is better or worse than you. All those levels within society. All that disappears. You know, if we're born in a high-class family, we've been trained, we've been conditioned to do that thing of looking at people, you know. We do it with a kind of arrogance, I'm better than you. When you meet somebody who's living from this, their innocence floors that, you know. Many times I've come across people who are considered to be high class, and you know, there's no space for it in this. It doesn't mean anything, and you're there talking to them, and suddenly they're uncomfortable. Their psychology can't handle it. Damn, you know, this guy hasn't got a 500 pair of trousers, you know, 500 quid pair of trousers, or my tweed jacket costs 2,000, and this bum, this nobody is looking at me like this. He sees his own arrogance in you. His openness, his ability to look in your face is coming from conditioning, not from openness, not from innocence. There are no levels in this. Everybody is equal. We're all the same being. End of story. I mean, it's hard to believe that just the seeing, of what is doing the seeing, in a sense, brings an end to all that. But it does. Just floors it all. Whoever you look at in that moment, you are creating. It can be the most beautiful woman in the world, it can be the ugliest person in the world. That is your creation. You're not separate from it. And when you live from this, there's that recognition. They're not other than you. There isn't a sense of otherness there. And there's love there. How can you separate yourself from yourself, When there's no sense of otherness, there's only love, naturally. And like I said before, this is what traditional spirituality has done. It's documented all these things, arrived at certain conclusions, put them in little books and boxes, and built little encyclopedias of knowledge inside the mind, and it's saying, well, it's like this and it's like this, and no, it's not. There isn't a third eye as such, What was, has been come under that label is, this that doesn't recognise two eyes here when it sees perceptually. That's the third eye. In a sense, if anything, you're a cyclops,
What's that?
A one-eyed monster. And there's a beauty too when you start seeing from this, because you're not seeing, in a sense, through the mind. You're not looking through the filter anymore. Colours are more colourful. The edges of things are more defined. There's a tremendous beauty comes with this seeing as well. And when you look, back, when you bring the attention back, there's just this thing which I said yesterday, Shakespeare called glassy essence, just this emptiness, just shining all of its own light, It's not even white or black. It's just this empty light. And that's what we are. We're this empty light within which everything just pops up. Which just doesn't happen in time, it's happening now. Always happens now. And there's no human being that is not having this. This is, if there's a base experience, this is it. It's true for everybody. It's true for the person driving past in the car right now. Might be totally unaware of that fact, because there are other experiences within it that the attention is on, but the base experience is this. In a sense, we've been taught to look out as such, and we just look at objectivity, not to use the object to point back to where the object is being perceived from. If we do that, the distance disappears.
Yeah, it's just is.
We've been trained, in the sense, to have a one-way arrow of attention. And then we fall into this conceptual reality. We don't see things as we saw them as a young child. A child doesn't live in a conceptual reality. That part of the mind doesn't come into play until later on. We start intellectualizing, then we become conceptual. Prior to that, we're just in a perceptual reality. What is perceived, and that's it. It's felt. It's known intuitively. It's not conceptualized. Not the intellect that plays with it. And of course, nothing in our educational system has encouraged us in any which way to be intuitive. Even when it came to the arts group, it was all, art through intellect.
It's complete left brain education.
Yeah.
Totally.
And some of us are not left brain, actually, we're right brain.
I am.
Yeah, I noticed. And so those people who, in a sense, failed, because they were stupid, were the ones who were actually naturally intuitive. They didn't fit into the curriculum.
Yeah.
So they left school usually feeling quite dumbed down about themselves. I'm a failure, and then expected to function in society in a way that they could be proud of themselves or whatever. It's not possible. The education system put pay to that, and it takes a lot, to come back to that place where you say, okay, so I was no good at school, and so what? I was no good at school, actually. What to say?
Got it just as quick as I could.
No, I loved it, listening to my son talking to somebody the other day, this American solicitor, This guy's like, well, he told us he was on the spiritual path, and everything we said to him just immediately evoked fear in him. I thought, I've got to give up talking to him, He was like suffering so much after 5 minutes. My son carried on talking to him, and the son said to him, you can ask yourself the questions. He said, you don't have to go in a book or listen to a CD or ask somebody else. He said, nobody else is an authority anyway. He said, if you agree with something somebody's saying, it's only because you already know that anyway. They're just confirming it. You're the authority. And it was perfectly clear what he said. And this guy was looking and said, what do you mean? He said, well, when I was very little, I used to ask myself, why is that like that? And then the answer used to come. This guy said, really? Son said, yeah. And he said, and now? Same, it comes immediately almost now, He said, at that time, I was doing like schoolwork and that, and, there was a doubt that I could answer my own questions because I was taught to depend on the teacher or the school system. And he said, but, I realised later on, it's not true. And he said, just ask the questions and the answers come up. And this guy was like, yes, but, He said, no, there isn't a yes, but. Your yes, but is coming from the fact that you don't do that. He said, if you try it, the yes, but will disappear. And it's so true,
I don't even like why, Why is a funny one.
It's already the wrong question, isn't it?
The answers always have to be why not, I think.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So it's always a good one for why anyway.
Yeah.
But why is it's a strange thing.
Well, ultimately there is no answer to why, is there? And because it is. And it's always the mind, based on the concept of having somebody at the centre of it, the ego mind, that asks the question why. It's always looking for purpose or reason. There isn't one. Human beings are born and die. There's no purpose to it. There's no reason for our being here, other than what is happening right now. And education again has taught us reason and purpose. A kid doesn't have that. Just walk around looking at things, don't they? Just taking it all in. They don't say, why has that tree got green leaves? Because go to school and they say, oh, well, there's this thing called chlorophyll and it comes from the sun, and and xylem and phloem, and and then suddenly you can't see the tree anymore. And we never know what anything is. It's an utter lie to settle for any answer to the question why. We never know what it is. I remember years ago, Master Da was doing a talk, and he said, we don't know what anything is. And somebody says, that doesn't make sense to me. I know that ashtray is an ashtray. And he said, well, we agree that we're going to give it a label, and the label is ashtray, but do you actually know what that is, And he said, well, yeah, it's a round object. He said, okay, do you know what a round is? And this slowly, he got this guy to see that all he ever had was labels. We agreed that something like that is called round, but what is a round, He destroyed it. He destroyed all this conceptualization of this person right there and then. And then the guy's sitting there and he said, okay, now tell me what you actually know about it. And the guy just stood there and he said, nothing. He said, that's divine ignorance. Stay there. Stay in that place. Because when you're divinely ignorant, you're in the highest intelligence. You're in oneness. Of course you don't know anything in oneness. Nothing. You don't even know nothing. Even nothing is a concept, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So nice to know nothing. It's refreshing, isn't it?
Is there a purpose that children learn these concepts, or could it also be without?
Yeah, I would say, if it wasn't like that, well, certainly up until this point in time, if it wasn't like that, the child would be seen as an imbecile in a society that's living conceptually. But that doesn't make the society right and the child wrong, does it? It's like the child has to cater for a sick society. The child has to become sick in order to fit into a sick society. That doesn't make the child wrong, it makes the society wrong. Yeah, if there's a reason, I would say that's the reason. You'd be an outcast in a society where you were just living perceptually. I mean, I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about after all the time, actually. I'm not even conceptualizing. Words are coming up, but there's no inner play of conceptualizing. There's just the perceiving of words arising, and the noting that somehow they make sense,
Some people say it is for the growth of the child, but the child is already everything.
No, I've noticed they eat food and they grow. That's the only requirement for growth. Stick food in their mouths. The growth of the mind, which would be knowledge, is not even a necessity, is it, as such? We've become so conceptual, in the way we live with one another, that we can't even imagine it's possible to live in a perceptual reality with somebody, where, in a sense, you know without knowing what somebody else needs, or they know what you need. And whenever that happens, when people are close to one another, where they've got nothing more to say to one another, they fall into a perceptual space with one another. When somebody sees that, say, oh my God, you're telepathic. No. When you're resting beyond the conceptual reality, you're not interfering with one another. You're just two things flowing in the same stream. So you act in a way that is in harmony with the other all the time anyway. It's the conceptualization really that's got in the way. And then therefore to come back to this perceptual reality, we end up having to use concepts. The way out of the conceptual reality is to rearrange the concepts to point to the perception. It doesn't make any difference here if a concept arises or doesn't. This is seen anyway. What happens is we fall into the concepts and we get cluttered looking at the mind all the time, looking at the conceptual mind, overlooking what is perceiving it, missing that, not putting the attention there. And then it just weighs us down, doesn't it? Somebody was here the first night and suddenly she just leaned forward and said, "Oh my God, I can really see what you're saying." She said, "It is seeing, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah, that's why I'm not saying thinking or, seeing, you're seeing it." And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, it's like a whole weight is falling off me." And the hands immediately went to the head, I said, "Yeah, you're coming out of the conceptual weight, She said, "Oh my God, it's like it's dropping off." And then she continued to conceptualize about it, but it was very, very clear, very pure what she was saying, and the people who were present were like, "Wow, yeah, so obvious what she's saying." And she wasn't stating anything other than what was being stated here a few moments before. Because when it's seen, it's not particular to any one of these forms, it's particular to all of them when it's seen. So it was expressing itself through that form in that moment. There's nothing special about it. We either see it or we don't see it, and that's it. And the boyfriend or whatever he was looking a little bit perplexed, like, "Oh my God, she got it." Half an hour later, he leaned forward and said, "Oh my God, I see what you mean. It is. I'm seeing it. I can see it." And suddenly he was talking about it, and she was smiling and nodding at him, and he was going, "Wow," just click, click, Reason and purpose belongs to the conceptual mind, which has come about, or the reliance on it. There's nothing wrong with conceptualizing things, but the reliance on it as an authority has come about through our conditioning. Our education system has made sure of that. And the whole of our education system is not designed to make us intelligent. Not at all. That's the furthest reason behind it. It's designed to manipulate us into thinking in a certain way so that we can become held in a certain place within society where other people can take advantage of us and run big businesses and all the rest. It's the game. When you're not in the conceptual reality anymore, you don't wake up in the morning and say, "Oh, I've got to go to work. I cannot, make money unless I..." No, you just say, "Wait a minute, I'm going to start just letting this live life, not this." It's a totally different way of seeing the world, totally different way of, watching the body function.
Avasa, just comes up the experience I had in the morning. Yesterday we talked about the curtain of what seemingly separates your experience from my experience, and I had planned to write a letter to my father this weekend, which I didn't do, but the thought of him came, and I thought, let's open up this curtain a bit, and I got so much panic, and I felt what I felt in my youth, his energy coming to me. Can't explain it, but it's and immediately got migraine I have now. Could you just tell something about this? But Because this is the past in a way, coming, and it just hit me. I was surprised by it. But these things tend to happen to me this period of time a lot. That things hit me, and then I feel physically unwell. It gives me the feeling that I do something wrong also then. I don't,
Well, it's not a matter of something being wrong or you doing something wrong. Your conditioning, from previous experience is present now, and whenever you are in any moment allowing that conditioning to slip, its whole design is to reinforce itself.
What do you mean by slip?
Slip.
Yeah.
Drop away. If something happens now, if suddenly a card out there backfires, for a fraction of a second, all your conditioning slips. Just goes. And you're suddenly very alert and totally present, And then, then it creeps back in again, In that second, what you experience is like a vital shock, When you're awake, you're in that vital shock all the time. Often you see, with people who are awake, something happens and they just casually go, somebody's tyres just exploded on their car. They don't do this. They sort of go, they sort of notice it. It's like the shock is immediate in that moment. It passes through them, and they don't have any lingering effect.
So you think
Okay, what happens when you're young and you're looking at your father, for instance? You're very much a feeling being at an early age, and some people can carry that, that poise of being a feeling being long after the age of 12 even. Doesn't happen often, but usually as a feeling being you begin to close down about the age of 3, but some people don't. Occasionally people can carry it a lot further in time. When you're a feeling being, whenever you approach anybody, you're going to feel their tension. You're going to experience their tension as you approach them. And the moment you touch their tension, you already know what the outcome of the situation is going to be based on the tension that's present. Now, if writing a letter to your father arises in you as something confrontational, in other words, I've got to write this. Now, if I write this exactly the way I want to and it flows out, it's going to become a confrontation with him. You're going to immediately feel that apprehension based on the pattern of how you've been conditioned in your relationship to him in your childhood. Now, you're going to immediately feel that, same energy present. Now, any daughter naturally loves her father. That doesn't mean that the father knows how to love the daughter. He should do, but, his conditioning is very strong. Maybe he doesn't. And so what happens is the daughter can only approach the father from the love because the conditioning isn't there, you see. But later on, you learn to approach your father through your conditioning, and then he accepts you. He doesn't accept you if you're open. Later on he accepts you because the conditioning that he's instilled in you, he can recognise and he can relate to that. Oh, that's familiar. And this does happen in families, sadly. We often within families, we don't accept one another until they become like us. And this is from the parent to the child. And when the child reaches a certain place, they realise, okay, I want to do this, but if I do that, it will not be accepted behaviour. So I won't do it quite like that. I'll do it like that, and then Daddy will accept it or Mummy will accept it. This is conditioning. The day that you can sit down and write a letter to your father as a flow coming out the end of your fingers and not give a damn whether he accepts it or sees it as stupid, or any of the judgments that are preventing you letting that letter being written in the way you want to write it. The day you can do that is the day you'll begin to break your father's conditioning, because you're an adult now. You know, when you can do that, you will begin to break his conditioning. and you see this game. You know, I tell you, it's very sad when you see somebody at the age of 70 trying to please their mother and father who are in their 90s, who are just like suffering from senile dementia and don't even know the game anymore. That, you know, they're in their second childhood. They don't even know their daughter or their son is their daughter or son. And there's the son trying to please daddy, and he's 80 years old or 70 years old or something. And then daddy dies, and he still carries on doing it. He believes his father's watching him from, you know, somewhere. And he's still acting in a way where he wants to get dad's approval. And it happens, I see it. I mean, this immaturity that should have dropped away, you know, long before the age of 12, you know. But I never ever said to my kids, I want you to do what I want you to do. I want you to be like me. None of my children are like me. The only way they're similar to me is they breathe, you know. I never asked them to be anything. I never wanted them to be like me. It'd be bloody boring, wouldn't it, having clones of yourself around the house.
It was just that it was like a cell, like exploding and I realized, like, oh, this is how it felt, how his feeling feels to me, but I didn't realize it earlier. So strong. But this is the strength I have been trying to avoid, because it's unbearable in a way. Yeah. And I thought, oh yeah, this is how this feeling feels from me, how I perceive it. Yeah. Oh my. Yeah.
Can you see in that way that every time you...
It's sickening. It's really sickening.
For sure.
And then but in a way it's like it's the past, you know.
Yeah, but what I'm saying to you is your past. Yes, I agree, it's in the past. Psychologically, it's a waste of time going there.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because when you go to it psychologically, you're in the conceptual mind. If you go to it with the perceptual mind, with your intuition at the level of feeling, it's present now. Yeah. You see, our past conditioning is present now at the feeling level as a feeling. And when we're open, we're going to meet these things because they're presently true, which are not true of us, which have been put there through our conditioning.
It seems like the more strength to bear is there, the more experience fully comes.
This is what we were saying yesterday, wasn't it? You were aware that as you open, you become more sensitive, and I said to you, the only way to protect yourself is to open 360 degrees. And then it hits you, of course. But, you know, at least now, in taking in the whole picture, you're beginning to recognise that this is not yours, this came from your father. And you know, the funny thing is, it's not his. It came from his father.
But it's my reaction, it's my bodily...
Not even.
That is what I...
When you're open, it's not your reaction, which is what I was trying to say to you yesterday.
I couldn't...
Yeah, when you're open, you see, whatever you're feeling is not coming, in a sense, from your openness. It gets a bit difficult here, but when you're open, there are no feelings present. If you're open, you can sit here with your eyes open or closed, and there will be a non-feeling present. Mm-hmm. Now, if a thought about your father arises within that, you'll probably find it will be accompanied by a tension that comes up. Mm-hmm. Or if you see your father walking towards you, or, you know, whatever the situation is, you'll feel a tension there. That tension is not yours. That tension is coming from him. Mm-hmm. Even if he lives 500 miles away, it doesn't mean anything. This is not about time and distance. You know, within the whole, every other part, of which there aren't any, but, you know, there's a way of talking about it. Every other part knows what every other part is doing. It knows the experience that's happening to each part, especially within family groups, particularly. You know, often when somebody goes through, you know, a huge catharsis, the mother or the father of that person is very aware of it but doesn't know what it is. You know, and often there's inquiry afterwards. You know, how were you all right yesterday? You know, there they were in Satsang going through some big issue, and Mum was feeling this ripple of this issue coming back and loosening something up there, you know. This is very real stuff, you know. We're not, when we talk about conditioning, we're not talking about some, you know, loose, floozy energy. So we're talking about something that once you kick it, you know, it resonates, and, you know, the ripple is felt, you know, down the line through those people that, you know, put it there. And, you know, like particularly family situations, when you start getting clear to begin with, your family are going to feel it intuitively and not even be aware of that maybe, and they're going to react. Very, very few families say, "That's wonderful, dear, I feel as though you're awakening." Forget it. They're not awake, and the last thing they want to see is you becoming awake, you know, because you're not going to support any of their bullshit as being a separate being. So what happens is, you know, Mum or Dad begins to feel this, you know, intuitive thing which they don't quite understand. They get irritated with you when you turn up because on some level they recognise it.
They don't open the door when I travel 1200 kilometers. They just leave me outside.
I had a friend who was Jewish, you know, and we connected the day we met, and every you know, 2 or 3 weeks he had to go home to see Mum and Dad. He didn't want to, he's beyond that by then, you know, but there was still very much the Jewish conditioning there. And then I noticed that every time he went, he had a little cap that he put on his head, you know. So one day he was walking out the door and said, "I'm off to Swansea to go and see my parents." I said, "Oh, great." And I took his hat and I threw it in the fire, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "You don't need a hat, it's not raining outside, you know." And eventually he sat down and he said, "I can't go without it." I said, "Well, you can buy another one." I said, "But, you know, before buying the other one, why not look at it, you know? Do they want the cap or the sun? Which one do they want? Because this is Jewish conditioning, you know. Oh, I'm not allowed to enter the door without the cap, so there you go." I went and bought him another cap, he put it in an envelope, and he sent the envelope. I said, "You don't need to go, and just send them the fucking cap. They don't want the sun." You know, at some point you draw the line, you say, "Hey, basta, you know, finish enough." You know, you don't play with it. You know, one of the things about conditioning, and parents do it to their children, is you owe me. You know, if I hadn't had sex with your mum, you wouldn't be here. If I hadn't carried you in my womb, you wouldn't be here. This is a big one. We don't own our bloody children. You know, our children they came from the same place as us. You know, they came from nothing. They don't belong to us. They're just, you know, people going through life with us, partners. And this is a big one in the conditioning, you know.